Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling a massive and honestly fascinating topic, the overlapping safety nets of Indian maintenance laws. You know, when we usually think about the law, we picture, well, strict rules, courtrooms, punishments, that sort of thing. But today, we're actually looking at the law as a literal lifeline. It's this incredibly complex, overlapping web designed to catch vulnerable family members right before they face total destitution. Okay, let's jump right into it and ask the really tough question. What actually happens to those left financially vulnerable when a family structure breaks down? I mean, when society's foundational unit fractures, who steps in to catch the people who fall? It's a heavy question for sure, but as you'll see, the legal framework in India has developed these multi-layered, highly responsive answers to make sure nobody gets left behind. To figure out how this works, here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll define what legal maintenance actually is. Second, we'll look at the role of personal law. Third, universal and secular protections. Fourth, we'll dive into some landmark maintenance cases. And finally, we'll wrap up with the broader pursuit of social justice. All right, kicking things off with Section 1, what is legal maintenance? Basically, our first safety net. So maintenance isn't just some random, arbitrary payout. No. It is a strict legal obligation that comes directly out of familial and matrimonial relationships. The whole point? To provide financial support to folks who simply cannot maintain themselves. It's an absolutely essential tool for social justice built from the ground up to preserve human dignity and keep people from falling into severe financial hardship. Now, if you read through the actual legal statutes, you're going to bump into some intimidating Latin jargon like pendenti lite. But don't let that scare you off. It literally just translates to during the pendency of litigation. Basically, it means temporary financial help given while a court case is actively happening. Think of it like a bridge. It makes sure a spouse who doesn't have their own income won't lose access to justice just because they can't afford to live during a really long trial. Now contrast that temporary bridge with permanent maintenance. This is the long-term safety net that drops into place after the court has made its final matrimonial decree, like a divorce or a judicial separation. And courts don't just pull a number out of thin air here. They grant this continuing support based on a really careful look at the income, the conduct of the parties, their actual financial capacity, and of course, their specific needs. What's truly fascinating is just how wide the law casts this net. It protects wives, children, and by the way, that includes both legitimate and illegitimate children, plus aged or infirm parents and other dependent family members. The law completely recognizes that financial vulnerability spans across generations and all different relationship types. Moving right along to Section 2, the role of personal law or religion-based family obligations. You see, India's legal landscape is uniquely designed to accommodate its incredibly diverse population. Across Hindu, Muslim, Christian, and Parsi laws, we see this common thread of family obligation baked right into the statutes. So, whether we're talking about the Hindu Adoptions and Maintenance Act, the Muslim Women Act of 1986, or the Christian Divorce Act from way back in 1869, courts can grant interim and permanent support based on the specific tenets of each individual faith. But what happens if someone falls through those specific cracks? That brings us to Section 3, universal and secular protections. The broader safety net. This is where we see a major shift in the legal framework. On one side, you have the faith-based approach, governed by those specific religious statutes we just talked about. But on the other, you have these universal secular statutes. These apply to every single citizen equally, completely irrespective of religion. And the focus here is incredibly pragmatic, providing speedy relief and urgently preventing destitution. The absolute cornerstone of this secular safety net is Section 125 of the Code of Criminal Procedure, or the CrPC. It provides an immediate, speedy relief mechanism. If someone has sufficient means but just neglects or refuses to maintain their dependents, be it a wife, a minor, or disabled child, or their elderly parents, Section 125 steps in as a quick, summary remedy to keep them off the streets. So let's look at how these different secular statutes divide up the protection. You've got the Special Marriage Act handling matrimonial maintenance for spouses, the DV Act, which protects women from domestic violence and, importantly, economic abuse. Then Section 125, CrPC, acts as that broad secular remedy we just mentioned. And finally, the Senior Citizens Act of 2007, which is absolutely vital welfare legislation aimed at preventing the abandonment of the elderly. Okay, let's move to Section 4, landmark maintenance cases, because we need to see the real-world impact of all this. Honestly, you literally cannot talk about Indian maintenance law without bringing up Muhammad Ahmed Khan v. Shah Banu Begum and Daniel Latifi v. Union of India. These two historic Supreme Court cases tackled the incredibly messy intersection of personal and secular law, specifically regarding divorced Muslim women. In these cases, the Supreme Court definitively recognized and really broadly interpreted the maintenance rights of divorced Muslim women. In doing so, they basically ensured that the economic safety net was powerfully extended to protect them, carefully navigating the statutory provisions so that a divorce didn't automatically mean financial destitution. And it doesn't stop there. When looking at the universal protections under Section 125 CrPC, the Supreme Court made an incredibly powerful declaration in the cases of Vimala v. Veeraswamy and Bhuwan Mohan Singh v. Meena. They clarified exactly what the secular safety net is actually meant to achieve. The court made it crystal clear. Maintenance is a measure of social justice and dignity. Honestly, guys, this quote right here is the absolute heart of today's explainer. These laws aren't just about transferring money from one bank account to another. They're fundamentally about acknowledging vulnerability and preserving basic human dignity and survival rights for everyone. But listen, the law is an ongoing balancing act. Take S. Vinita v. Deputy Commissioner. Here, the courts actually had to calibrate these overlapping safety nets. They had to carefully balance the welfare rights of senior citizens to their property against the protection of a woman's right to a shared household under the DV Act. It just goes to show how nuanced and highly responsive the legal system has to be. And that brings us to our final section, the pursuit of social justice. Let's zoom out and look at the big picture. Ultimately, whether we're talking about personal statutes rooted in faith or universal secular laws acting as swift remedies, all of these legal mechanisms reflect our deepest core constitutional values. They are intentionally designed to protect economically weaker spouses, safeguard children and parents, prevent vagrancy, and just actively promote equality and social welfare across the board. As our society rapidly evolves, I want to leave you with this final, somewhat provocative thought to reflect on. Where exactly does strict legal duty end and our inherent moral family responsibility begin? The state has built an incredible, overlapping legal safety net to prevent destitution, but how will the balance between these legal mandates and our own personal duties continue to shift? Thanks so much for exploring these vital frameworks with me today in this explainer, and definitely keep asking those tough questions.